What is up, weather enthusiasts? I'm your host, Pat's Path Predictor. Let's get right into the weather. Tonight, we have quite a few things to discuss, starting with our threat that's going on over Florida that will expand into the East Coast. And we'll be talking mainly starting with that and going from there. But before we do, we have our co-host tonight, Yoshi. Yoshi, say hello.
Hello.
Hey, it's
I'm,
good.
Yo-
Oh,
I'm Yoshi, and I'm the tropical analyst here for streams and whatnot.
all right. All right, welcome to the stream. Yeah, we got quite the interesting situation going on, for at least across parts of the southeastern United States. Let's go ahead and get right into it. So here's the situation that we have for you tonight. We have our area of interest. Hasn't been designated an invest or anything like that just yet. We're gonna see if that happens or not. But ultimately, as of 8 p.m., we still have a 60% chance of formation in the next 7 days, but the 48-hour probability has increased to 40%. Yoshi, you've been looking at this. You've been paying very close attention to it. What are your overall thoughts as to the setup and how the system has progressed and how it will progress going forward?
Well, I'm just gonna answer that question really quick. We'll get into the components of it later, but we're already starting to see signs of it trying to get going here, and we don't really know where it's gonna go. Some models are saying it's gonna take a landfall in the Carolinas or Georgia, and some it's saying that it's gonna go out to sea. We really don't know. All we know is that it's fairly likely to form so far, and it's gonna be fairly close to land for at least part of its life, and that we should definitely be tracking this, especially those in the southeast.
All right. All right, that's definitely for sure. We're seeing a lot of convection firing off across Florida. You were talking about the flood threat over there, how that's kind of been panning out. Is there anything you'd like to add in regards to that? I know you've been making segments for the channel and all of that, but is there anything you'd like to add in those regards, considering that is a pretty big hazard for those tuning in from there?
I will say, not a lot has changed since our last video, which is a couple hours ago. I
Yeah.
will say though, and I do need to research on this a bit more. I'm looking at models and I'm making forecasts right now.
Mm-hmm.
But the flooding threat is likely to extend to the Outer Banks here
Ooh.
of North Carolina.
Oh, wow.
It could. A lot of models are saying it could get really close there, and that it's not exactly going to stall, but it's not going to try to be quick either. It's going to take its sweet old time. You know, it doesn't care if it's fast.
Yep.
So, we're probably going to see a good amount of rain at least in the Outer Banks, and probably some flooding, I'd imagine.
All right.
Looking at what we're seeing here. So I'm gonna make the forecast real quick so we can read it out here,
All right.
since I did kind of forget to make that today.
All right, you go ahead and take care of that. I'll go ahead and talk about kind of what we know and what we're paying attention to. So here's what we know with this system right now. The NHC's put out this latest advisory right here in regards to this area of interest. Disorganized showers and thunderstorms across the Florida Peninsula eastward to the adjacent waters of the southwestern Atlantic Ocean are associated with a weak surface trough of low pressure. Environmental conditions are forecast to become more conducive for development, and a tropical or subtropical depression could form over this region over the weekend while the system drifts northward or northeastward. Regardless of development, heavy rainfall is possible across portions of Florida, west central and southwestern Florida, through early Saturday and across the coastal regions of the Carolinas beginning later on Saturday. An Air Force Reserve Hurricane Hunter aircraft is scheduled to investigate the system on Friday if necessary. So 40% probability in the next 48 hours, 60% in the next 7 days. If we go ahead and go to aircraft reconnaissance and their forecast for their subject for tomorrow, at least they're looking at the potential for going out there. It looks like they will be arriving there if they do end up going around 18Z, which is about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. they make their decision will probably be a couple of hours beforehand, and we'll have to see how this will ultimately pan out. This will be low-level reconnaissance according to what we have right here, and we'll have to see how this will ultimately pan out. But it looks like, as of right now, it's going to be kind of more of an East Coast threat. Although Florida is going to be seeing some pretty heavy rainfall from this as well. Taking a look at satellite right there, convection is blowing up on all around Florida and all those areas right there. Disorganized convection is starting to fire up around the area of interest, around that orange X the NHC has highlighted out. So for right now, and especially for the 4th of July, it looks like much of Florida is going to be seeing a lot of pretty heavy rainfall. So you're probably not going to see a fireworks show if you're down there, especially if you're in the Florida Peninsula. The Florida Panhandle might get a little bit luckier, but we'll have to see at this current point. In terms of what we're watching in parts of the Carolinas and Georgia, it looks like the threat will mainly be along the coast, or particularly with heavy rainfall and some heavy swells. I was talking to Connor. He lives in North Carolina. He was talking about the big risk about that. So that's another area we're paying attention to. And like Yoshi said, the Outer Banks is also an area that we are watching as well. So that's kind of the situation that we are dealing with right here. Taking a look at some of the models right there, the models have been doing a better job of picking up what's been going on over there, and we can kind of show you this. The Europeans 12Z is now out, and it does have a low pressure system developing off the East Coast in the next, I'd say, next 42 hours or so, by around the 5th of July, and kind of just hovering around there and moving towards the Carolinas right there. The European is a bit interesting, though. It doesn't really have it really that organized, but it still has a pretty big flood threat for much of the region regardless, as it makes landfall over there. So we're going to have to pay attention to that as well. Taking a quick gander at the GFS. The 18Z GFS is out right now. A GFS, similar situation, although relatively disorganized, and makes landfall in the Carolinas, although it does cause a pretty significant amount of flooding across a lot of these regions. Taking a quick look at the Canadian run, right here. Canadian run is a bit wonky. I'm not really trusting this right now. And the icon, taking a quick gander at this as well, has the system organizing and developing pretty decently, but then it kind of just takes a bit of a loop-de-loop and then makes landfall in the Carolinas over here. So we're going to have to watch that going forward. So ultimately, there is quite a bit of uncertainty whether, as Yoshi was mentioning, whether this thing will ultimately make landfall or stay out to sea. Looking at some of the ensembles that we have pulled up, I can take a quick look at that. I'll take a quick look at the 12Z European ensembles right here. 12Z European wants this system to actually head towards South Carolina. Actually, that's the general consensus, and I can go ahead and zoom in on this a little bit and move my screen over just to show you that. But ultimately, let's go ahead and zoom in on this. But the consensus now is a relatively weak system heading towards Georgia or South Carolina, according to 12Z European. Now, granted, this is just one run right here that we're going to have to pay attention to. And if we go ahead and go back to the 0Z as well, it was definitely a bit more all over the place, with some ensembles having this stay out to sea, some having it hit Georgia and the Carolinas, and some having it kind of just stalling out and all of that. But the 12Z European has definitely become a lot more consistent and shifted a lot further to the west, which I think is pretty interesting. But it's also bringing a bit of a weaker setup as well that I'm noticing. Doesn't really extinguish the flood threat or anything like that, but it is bringing like a weaker system, like a tropical depression system, maybe across parts of those regions right there. So we're going to have to pay attention to that. Looking at the GFS ensembles as well. GFS 0Z ensembles are kind of all over the place. Looking at the 12Z ensembles, they're still kind of all over the place, but the majority of them do want this going out to sea. So we're going to have to see how these models will bob and weave, go back and forth and all of that, and we'll keep you updated on that as time continues to go on based on what we're seeing with the ensemble so far. So that's kind of the big picture situation that we are seeing right now. And we'll have to see. How this will go ultimately. We're seeing a lot more people in the stream right now. Be sure to like the stream, subscribe to the channel if you are new. The goal, as always, is to get more people engaged with weather. And I believe Yoshi is still working on his forecast. right now. And actually, Alex sent me something to take a quick gander at for our audience right here. We're going to go ahead and do that. So here's what we have right here. This is the days 1 through 7 rainfall possibilities from the Weather Prediction Center right here. As you can see, much of Florida and much of the Carolinas do see quite a bit of rainfall in the next 7 days, in part because of this system. We're looking at up to potentially 3 to 4 inches of rain in some isolated areas of Florida. Generally, between 1 and 2 inches of rain across the Carolinas. And parts of Georgia right here, especially southeastern Georgia. That could definitely be a bit of a flood threat if for sure. We'll have to pay attention to that. But then you're noticing as we get to North Carolina, a lot of the rainfall starts to ramp up over here, especially along the eastern part of the states and particularly in the Outer Banks. So that's also a heightened area to pay attention to moving forward. So I figured I'd show that to our audience and as we continue to keep an eye on this. So yeah, that's our situation that we have going on in terms of our flood threat for the most part. In terms of whether this system will develop or not, there's actually a pretty decent shot that it does. The question is, how is this going to ultimately pan out? How are the conditions going to pan out? And how are what's the setup looking like? So here's what we have going on right here in terms of our setup. Taking a quick look at that. So ultimately, what we're looking at here is we're going to kind of take a look at the shear and the moisture environment because water temperatures we don't really need to look at as much. I mean, we can glance at them a little bit right here, but as you can see, we're looking at 28 to 29 degrees Celsius of water just offshore of Florida and the Carolinas. And that's more than enough fuel on its own, but we have to look at other factors as well. So you have a lot of energy and a lot of OHC to really allow for the system to kind of use its theta E component to kind of become more tropical and develop. So ultimately, here's our wind shear map right here. As you're noticing right here, and we mentioned this in today's video, there's going to be a trough that digs down into parts of the Carolinas just north of the system right here. And this is kind of where that model uncertainty plays in, because if the system rather heads towards land, it's going to be running right into this huge area of potentially 50 knots of wind shear. That's not good for tropical development. That's why that's favoring more of a weaker scenario in that region right there. So that's a factor that we're going to have to watch right there. But you are noticing kind of that trough staying over there. It does shift over a bit to the west as the system potentially heads towards the Carolinas, but we'll have to pay attention to see how that will pan out. You're also noticing a bit of an increase in shear as well in parts of Florida, the Bahamas, kind of around that, kind of closing off some of that development potential as well as its intensity potential as well. But if it does stay out to sea and it kind of moves a bit further to the south of this jet right here, it could ultimately allow for whatever inflow that does ultimately come off of this to kind of get fed into there and filter it out a lot more and potentially allow for a stronger scenario that will just ultimately move off the coast and stay out to sea generally. So that's kind of the uncertainty right here. So a stronger scenario would favor the system staying more so out to sea, staying away from land, and kind of riding off of this shear right here for its outflow. A weaker scenario would favor more of a landfall situation, just general gist, which ultimately wouldn't be the most optimal situation, but it would be. But ultimately, the main threat would not be winds; it would be flooding and maybe some rip currents and swells and all of that stuff that we'd have to pay attention to. So that's kind of our wind shear component. The one component I am questioning right here a little bit is the dry air aspect of it. Yes, there is a moisture pocket in parts of the northwestern Atlantic right now, but there is dry air affiliated with the trough that's going to be moving into parts of the Atlantic right there, parts of the Gulf Stream. Dry air intrusion is a potential factor. Now, according to this, there's a possibility that this dry air gets mixed out by the system and the convection and the moisture in the region, but we'll have to see how that pans out going forward. And if there is a bit of dry air intrusion, that could also inhibit some tropical development going forward. And that in part kind of it doesn't help when there's 50 knots of shear just to the north of this low pressure system. So that's something you're also going to want to pay attention to. So that's kind of your situation that we have right here. So All right. So Brady is asking, what are the chances for the storm being a tropical storm? It's the odds of that. I would say we're gonna have to pay attention to that as well. I would say right now I'd wait for initial development before I jump to conclusions with that. In part because there's so much uncertainty regards to how this is going to pan out, if this is going to stay out to sea, if this is going to move towards land. If this does move towards land, it's less likely for the system to be a tropical storm. But if it moves away from land and out to sea, similar to what the GFS is offering, then we could see that probability go up quite a bit as it stays away from that shear. So it's kind of dependent on how the system evolves. The next 24 hours, in my opinion, are going to be the most critical aspect of this whole scenario, and that's our area that we're going to have to watch. So thank you for the question. I really do appreciate that right there. So, yeah. Is there okay, so okay, so okay, okay. Okay, so next question right there. Is there still Sahara dust blowing through the northern Caribbean? Let's take a quick gander at that. We can use satellite imagery to kind of extrapolate that. If there isn't any now, there likely will be throughout much of the month. But taking a quick look at visible right here and taking a quick gander at that, I'll take a look at true color as well. Excuse me. And taking a quick look at that, there is some dust kind of moving towards parts of the Caribbean, and I do want to actually take a look at the dry air aspect of it just to kind of gander at that as well. Yeah, it looks like there is some dust in parts of the northern Caribbean right there, and that's going to be a trend that continues for a little while, and we'll continue to pay attention to it, especially as the monsoon season starts to ramp up off the coast of Africa. So thank you very much. I appreciate the question. I appreciate the question. So, all right. Yeah, Avery, Rama, Pat, can we please check the trade winds in the Atlantic so we could see kind of what's going on in the Atlantic? Yeah, let's check the trade. Let's check if we're seeing stronger or weaker trade winds with this. I believe this is the U anomalies right here. That we're looking at right here. Taking a quick gander at this, it does look like we're looking at stronger. It looks like the trade winds across parts of the Caribbean and parts of the MDR are kind of stronger, but in those regions. But in the Gulf, in the Atlantic Basin, and in like the northern part where the Sahara Dust is, you're looking at more favorable wind potential right there. So we'll have to kind of gander at that. We'll kind of have to wait and see how this will ultimately pan out going forward. But that's kind of our trade winds right there, at least in much of the Caribbean and the MDR for the next little while. You are seeing stronger than expected trade winds, so that's something you're going to want to pay attention to right there. So, yep.
You might want to redo that segment. You were checking 200 millibars, not 850. Commenter pointed that out.
Okay, you want me to look? Let's look at 850.
Yeah, look at 850. 200 is practically useless for that sort of stuff.
Okay, 850. Yeah, it looks like in much of the tropics there are generally stronger trade winds, but there are a few areas that are seeing weaker trade winds. For starters, you're looking at the Caribbean right here, much of the southern half of the Caribbean. You're looking at weaker trade winds on Bay of Campeche as well. The Gulf region is seeing some trade winds as well, but they're not as pronounced as they are in parts of the main development region. So overall, I would say you are seeing more trade winds than usual, but it's not as pronounced as it was at 200 or anything like that. So we'll have to pay attention to that going forward. What's up?
Okay. I just want to make sure you know about this map. What does the red and the purple mean?
Red means more trade winds. Purple means less.
No, it's the exact opposite, actually.
Oh.
It might have been a mistake for me. I may have said that, but I probably should have told you, but earlier.
Well, hey.
But this type of map says that we would see more warming in the MDR and the Caribbean.
Okay, Okay, we all make mistakes. I do apologize for my error, and hopefully.
Don't blame him, by the way. Blame me. I gave him that information a couple months ago.
It's okay. Don't worry about it. Hey, we learn. But okay, if that's the case, then that changes everything for me. That changes a lot of aspects of it, actually. You're seeing less trade winds across the tropics for right here. Looking at the 5-day mean, you're seeing a lot less trade winds initially. The trade winds do get a little bit stronger in some aspects, but that's mainly temporary, and it's kind of concentrated in the Caribbean. So now that I have that information, yeah, this is going to be favoring a pretty significant warming trend for much of the MDR. And looking at the water temperatures already, we're looking at like 28 to 29 degrees Celsius waters across much of this region right there. Expect that to increase considerably, ladies and gentlemen, and also expect the Gulf to continue to warm up pretty much, and continue to do that as well. Consider looking at these trade winds. So, I do apologize for that. Thank you for the question though. So, yeah. But anyway, Yoshi, how's the forecast going?
I'm writing more sections than I thought I would be. I'll hopefully be done in like 10 minutes. Probably
Perfect.
not even bad.
Perfect. So in the meantime, while we're waiting for that, we'll continue to take questions. We'll continue to keep going. So continue to keep going with the stream. So yeah, be sure to like the stream, subscribe to the channel if you are new. The goal, as always, is to get more people engaged with weather. We would really appreciate that. We have almost 60 people in the stream right now, so that would be very wonderful if you guys could do that. But in the meantime, though, yeah, that's our trade wind potential right there, and yeah, that's even more concerning than I was originally thinking. Right there, taking a second look at this, because it actually does make sense why it's like this. Because looking at the wind shear as well, I mean, look at the MDR, ladies and gentlemen. That's not a lot of wind shear, particularly in the western 2/3 of the MDR. And considering the weaker trade winds, that's a bit concerning as well to take a look at. Just very quickly, I want to take a look at the shear averages as well. It looks like for the most part, this is kind of what you would expect. At least the shear is a lot more fluctuative than previously. There is more shear than average across parts of the western tropics for this month, but there's less shear in parts of the eastern tropics and the main development region, more noisy over here as well. So that's also another factor to pay attention to as well, on top of some of the other factors that we were looking at. Now, taking a quick look, I also do, just out of curiosity, want to take a look at the 500 millibar height anomalies, just to kind of see them. And actually, no, I think it would be better if we got, the height anomalies right here. This would be perfect. Taking a quick look at this could also be a factor in terms of waters warming up and all of that stuff as well. We're looking at higher than average heights for much of this run across parts of the western tropics right here. Similar to what we were seeing earlier this month with the Gulf just absolutely not earlier this month, earlier back in June with the absolute surge that we saw in temperatures, in part because of the heat dome in that region over there, and those waters just going down deeper and deeper and deeper into the ocean as well. So that's also something to consider right there. So you're noticing above average heights and more of a ridge pattern as well that could definitely help heat up, especially the western tropics in the Gulf region and in the northwestern Caribbean. So that's also something to pay attention to as well. So yeah, 90-degree Fahrenheit water wouldn't be comfortable to swim in. Yeah, that'd be almost bathtub waters right there. Thanks for pointing that out. And staying in that for longer than 15 minutes is not particularly the most optimal thing to do if you want to go to the beach. So yeah, let's go. But yeah, taking a quick gander at all of that. Also, just want to point out too the ocean heat content, since I was just mentioning that as well. The OHC, man. Looking at this, I would say for July, this is when we're going to see our largest amount of OHC increase. And this is also something to watch as well. You're already looking at the Gulf, and you're already looking at the western half of the Atlantic, which already has pretty considerable amounts of ocean heat content. Now, granted, I think the Gulf, it's a bit more tricky to forecast. It's because you have to take into account mesoscale convection, all that stuff that does ramp up there. But I would say the loop current will definitely see higher OHC for much of July. And I will say, at least in parts of the Gulf, you're going to see multiple pockets of higher OHC, especially around those eddies around the loop currents that you're going to want to pay attention to. But I think where we're going to see kind of the biggest increases of OHC are going to be in the northwestern Caribbean and in the Atlantic Basin over here, predominantly because, I mean, we have already seen, for example, the Atlantic Basin, how much warmer it got over there. I mean, if you take a look at this map right here, we're already at 29 plus degrees Celsius waters at 30 degrees north right here. And those waters are only going to continue to warm up as time continues to go on, as we get deeper and deeper into hurricane season. So that's what we're paying attention to right here. And I think those waters are going to start to kind of trickle further and further to the south as well as time goes on. We'll have to see how that pans out. But ultimately, this is where we saw our largest water temperature increase, and the OHC has really started to reflect on this. Matter of fact, if we go back to June, this was just last month, ladies and gentlemen. This was June 1st, 2025. Where you had a lot of this OHC kind of mainly staying south of the subtropical region, mainly concentrated in the tropical basin right here, and mainly concentrated in the loop current in the Caribbean and those regions as well. Looking at what we're seeing on July 3rd, look how much further up to the north we are seeing right here. That is very concerning for me to take a look at as a forecaster, especially if tropical systems, instead of heading towards the Caribbean, they move out to sea and potentially put parts of Canada, parts of New England, and parts of the mid-Atlantic in the line of fire. It's going to be going through going through larger than expected OHC and larger than expected water temperatures as well. So that's something to watch right there. So another trend that we've noticed too is a lot of this OHC or in the MDR and parts of the Caribbean have kind of shifted a bit more to the north, which I do think is a curious trend. The OHC and the MDR, that's kind of to be expected as it shifts further to the north. ITCZ is going on. You have a bunch of other factors that are going on. The extreme southeastern parts of the northern Atlantic right here. That's kind of to be expected. But the way I look at it is pretty interesting to take a look at. But ladies and gentlemen, as I continue to talk about this, we actually do have Yoshi's forecast that he would like to read out. Yoshi, if you would like to go ahead, please go ahead and read it out for our audience.
Pat, I was hoping you'd read it out if you would want to.
Are you sure? I can do that. Yeah.
Yeah. If you wanna.
Yeah, I'd be thrilled to do that. So
Awesome.
Okay, so our hurricane forecast discussion number 10, 8:10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, July 3rd, status localized flooding events. Overview. A low-pressure system east of Florida is attempting to develop, and models have supported development. The conditions are generally favorable for tropical development. The back end of the system will drop excessive rainfall over Florida and cause local flooding. Isolated flooding events are possible in the Outer Banks of North Carolina. Modeling. Models have stayed consistent with development, getting together with track. Official forecast. NHC went 40-60 in their latest forecast with more favorable wording. Florida. Florida will be rained out for another day at least before the system moves out. Up to 2 inches of rain are forecasted for the state, especially on the coasts. Flooding is still possible, but the threat has gone considerably down. Despite this, people should still be alert and prepared. South Carolina. South Carolina may get the most wind of the system as it turns towards the state. Some models indicate South Carolina as to be a landfall spot. However, it is still too early to say. People along the South Carolina coast should be getting ready now. North Carolina. The Outer Banks and nearby areas may see localized flooding events as upwards of 2 inches are forecast to fall. North Carolina, especially those along the coasts, should be ready for flooding events. Government actions. Hernando and Pasco counties, along with the cities of Sarasota and St. Petersburg, have opened sandbag locations, weather permitting. Writer's commentary. We will start forecasting on more current observations as the system has appeared to gain some sort of rotation, meaning it may be trying to start to form now. Along with that, wind forecasts may be issued fairly soon. Yoshi, thank you for creating that forecast right there. We really appreciate it, and thank you for allowing me to read that out.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Um, so I should know what we've talked about so far. We've talked about a lot
yeah,
actually.
I've kind of been pivoting
So
back and forth across a lot of
yeah.
things.
Yeah. So uh, if we go over to the MLB radar at Palm Bay, the east coast of Florida here, we would start to see anyway some sort of rotation
All
around
right,
it actually on the sea.
all right, I'll t-
If we go look at these type of squall line kind of features, type of lines,
all right,
we can see that the at the east part of the system it's moving north, and if we look at the south part of it, it's moving the east part is going north, and the south part is starting to go um south part is starting to go east,
yeah,
and it's trying to make itself towards those other clouds there,
yeah,
which is very interesting, and it shows that something is certainly trying to happen, and that's why we think that we could see an invest by 0 to freezy about 4 maybe 8 a.m. Early, very early tomorrow, maybe just about. We're thinking that, and the NHC thinks that too because by 2 p.m. they're going to send a reconnaissance aircraft out for for a suggested invest here, which
yeah.
means they think that this is going to develop fairly fast, maybe, which wouldn't be too surprising looking at the conditions we got right now. So certainly an interesting system now. We're not yet at the part where we stop looking at models because the system itself is formed, but it's certainly trying to get there
Yeah.
faster than we initially expected. What's your thought on that, Pat?
Yeah, I'm looking at on radar scope right now. Actually, I'm showing the audience this. Yeah, I'm noticing that rotation that you're noticing. It's on the Melbourne radar right here. Looking at how the eastern stuff is starting to rotate a bit further up to the north, and kind of how the south and southeastern stuff is starting to shift up accordingly. So you're definitely seeing some rotation with that, as well as some banding that is starting to develop with this system. So here's the so that's kind of what I'm looking at. I do agree with you in terms of this system developing further quicker than expected. Yeah, I could definitely hop on that train for a couple of reasons. Number one, I don't think we were expecting this system to just pop off of Florida and start to develop right away like this. And number two, this is sitting over at least 28 degrees Celsius waters as of right now, like 27, 28 degrees Celsius waters that are only going to continue to get warmer. And as those waters continue to get warmer, it's going to allow for more convection to eventually happen due to evaporation. But also, I am a little skeptical, a bit, right, a little bit skeptical, I would say, because there is some wind shear to the north of it, but we'll have to watch and see how that will develop. But overall, it's doing a fantastic job of its early development. And at least based on radar and some satellite imagery, I'm inclined to agree with your take so far.
And the thing is, like, for now, anyways, it looks like moisture won't be much of a problem.
No.
If we go look at SCP mesoanalysis hourly here, we see that we have PWATs very high, above 2 inches for a lot of a forecast area here, actually. 2.4 right at the center of it, which means that it's going to be really, really good, very moist air. It's going to reach that for a while.
Yeah.
If we look at moisture transport, let's look at 850. We got a decent amount of it here going up.
Do you have your
Where is
screen to
it?
share that with? Because I don't have that.
Yeah, sure.
Please, thank you.
We get it.
When-
Do do.
Whenever you're ready, but yeah.
And There we go. It's on my other tab here.
Okay.
Okay, there we go.
All right.
Let's
Perfect.
move back to precipitable water here.
All right.
And this is what we're looking at. We got green, we got a more darker green, which is lined out here. And that lined out dark green is anything above 2 inches of precipitable water, it looks like. And throughout this entire area here, up towards South Carolina, we have precipitable water values above 2 inches, which
Mhm.
is just insane to me, honestly,
Yeah,
looking
that's
at
a
it.
lot of rainfall. That's a
And
lot of
if we go
rainfall with
to
this. Like if you pretty much
absolutely
compress all the oh,
850,
go ahead.
850 millibar moisture transport here, a lot of the moisture is going up into the area we're looking at here.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if I'm really on anything, Pat. You can tell me if I'm onto something, but if you look at the moisture where it's actually going, we can kind of see like a rotation kind of thing,
Yeah, I'm noticing
kind of.
that. Yep, I'm
We got
noticing that.
this arrow and South of Florida going up here very fast, and then you got this area going really slow, probably just developed here, and then
Yeah.
it's trying to go back. It's kind of like in a circle. If it weren't for this part, which takes it straight up to South Carolina here,
It's
it's certainly trying to do something. We can tell looking at the moisture where it's going,
yeah, at least on those observations, it's
and once
definitely
it
trying to get its
important
act
part.
together. So, we'll have to see what
Mhm.
happens.
And the moisture here is going towards the area of where it's going, which is pretty normal. But like the background environment in general definitely looks like something that would favor moisture here,
Yeah.
honestly. Let's look at what are we going to look at here? Dew point? Can we look at dew point? We can. I don't know what any of these colors mean. I believe that's dew point.
Yeah,
That
that's dew
is.
point temps. Oh,
That's a
and
lot
oh
above
wow, that is
76.
we're
Pretty
looking at
high.
yeah, we're looking at mid 70s dew points. That is
Yeah.
a lot of moisture, especially for that. I mean, it's not. I mean, that's a lot of moisture for this setup right here, especially with the potential
Mhm.
dry air possibility. But that I was looking at. But man, oh man, that is interesting.
See if we have relative humidity here on some of these.
Yeah, if we could see the relative
We
humidity.
should, not surface winds.
What we're trying to do
Relative
here for those
humidity.
tuning in the
Let me get that.
audience is we're trying to
There we
look at
go.
how much what the moisture component is and kind of how much moisture the system has to work with, and if there's a potential dry air at least that could potentially stop this. But as of right now, it's in a pretty big moisture pocket. I think a bigger moisture pocket than I think we anticipate at this current point at this time.
Possibly.
Yeah.
And, a lot of East Florida, especially, is very high 90s. We got a few stations that are showing 100 here,
Wow.
which means it's in a very healthy environment here. We do have this 63 buoy here, which isn't too bad, but it definitely could be better. But it is going up. The trend is going up. A while ago it was around 53, and now it's around 64. If we go to, let's check on the National Data Buoy Center here, actually, since we're going to get a lot more stuff out of it,
Oh yeah. We're
hopefully.
yeah. Surface
Let's look at
observations
this.
like oh yeah, surface
East of
observations
Cape
like
Canaveral.
this are very key for development like this because we're seeing a possibility of development off the coast. We want to look at every aspect, and man, oh man, do we have some good aspects?
Absolutely. This is more for temperature here. I will tell you, sea temperature, very nice. 28.8 all around on this. However, I don't think we have any vet tracks. Could be wrong, but it doesn't look like we have any Vectrek relative humidity here.
Okay,
I'm not seeing. That sucks. Okay, well, either way, we can look at the land observations and say it's in a pretty good environment.
very much so.
And even looking that it's going to here, very moist environment here. That 31 is a fluke. Don't worry. We got a whole
Yeah.
bunch of 80s, 90s across this area.
Across the coast.
It's only when we go really north here when we start to see some more dry, and that's in the Appalachian Mountains. There looks like they're always going to be dry a good bit. I didn't want to zoom in. There we
Yeah.
go. So yeah, it looks like at least on land, it's getting some pretty healthy moisture here.
Yeah. Based on the land obs alone, we can say that this is in a very healthy moisture environment. The question now, I would say, is what is the shear going to do to this? I mean, is the shear? I don't think the shear is doing too much to it right now. Granted, it is just trying to develop, so it's a little early to determine, but I can tell, at least on satellite imagery, where the shear is, and it's just to the north of the system. Like, it's off the coast of the Carolinas right now. So the question I have now is, what's the shear going to ultimately do to this? That's the main thing we have now, because the water's plenty warm, the environment is plenty moist. Now the main issue is, what is the wind shear going to do to this? And Yoshi, what are your thoughts?
Well, I have this on here, Cyclonic WX. I'm streaming it, and it looks like for the first few. That's hour 132. What happened? I wasn't. Oh, this is a super early run too. There we go. Okay, so what it looks like here to the north of it, it could be experiencing some shear issues. However, throughout the entirety of its life, it looks like it's going to be in some kind of low shear bubble, at least on the GFS. Now we
Okay.
could look at ECMWF and see what's happening. It's going to be a bit older, but it should still be as good.
Yeah.
And as we look here, shear is a bit closer to it, I will tell you. But the rotation itself, it looks like, is going to be in a very low shear pocket once again. So shear is going to be all around it, which could do something. But for the rotation itself, if models are correct, then it could be in a low shear bubble the entire time.
All right. If that's the case, then we might have a sleeper situation here.
Someone pinged me here.
Mm-hmm.
Here's RTMA for dew point and surface.
Yep, I'm pulling that up.
I don't think RTMA tracks that kind of thing on the ocean now, right? Unless this could be modeled. This could be modeled.
Yeah, it looks.
Which, in this case, I can sort of trust it then.
Yeah.
I'm not too
Yeah, I know
sure.
Charlie sent that to us, so ultimately,
One more.
yeah.
Oh, it's moderation stuff. I can't talk about that.
Yep.
Okay.
All right.
We're gonna do it that later. But for now, yeah, we got all this going on. Not really a lot more to talk about, I'd imagine. It has been 45 minutes.
Yeah.
So, anything else? Any questions actually? Since I
Yeah.
should probably be looking for those.
Yeah. Are there any questions in the chat that people can would like to ask? Let's take a quick look.
We got a whole bunch of questions here.
All
Actually,
right.
I believe.
Let's do it.
I may sound crazy, but I think we're gonna get Chantal from this. There's certainly a possibility. The
Oh, yeah.
NHC believes that we may get Chantal from this. Pat, why won't we see the amount of warming in the Atlantic we saw in 2023? Well, since it's a question for you, I want to see how you perform on this, Pat.
Yeah, I can explain it.
answer.
Yeah, I can explain it. I can do my best to explain it. So, taking a look at, we can start by looking at the climate reanalyzer. This gray line right here is 2023, and this was our peak water temperature by the time we got to August. This is 2024, which is this orange line right here. Now, where this is, and the red line is where we are at currently. I'll actually try and update this very quickly. This is the red line. Now, 2023 was a very exceptional case where the water temperatures just absolutely exploded across much of the region. We had a scenario where we had an El Nino that ultimately typically means we don't see much tropical development. But what ultimately ended up happening was the Atlantic. We saw. I think I remember, if I remember correctly, we saw pretty strong high pressure systems affiliated with this across much of the Atlantic, with the Bermuda and the Azores high really turning up. We had pretty strong high pressure. You also had a negative PNA, I believe, as well. That kind of helped with this as well. But ultimately, what ended up happening is the waters in the subtropics, especially, really, really warmed up. In part because the Gulf Stream was in many ways off a different level. The anomalies I remember from that along the Gulf Stream in that region were absolutely incredible. That was just a rare case of everything coming together right at once for warm waters. You had a negative PNA, you had strong high pressure systems, and you didn't really have that much convection, and the trade winds also were considerably weaker than they should have been in 2023. Normally, El Niños strengthen the trade winds rather, but because you had those very warm anomalies in the subtropical Atlantic, in part because of the Gulf Stream going haywire, it absolutely crushed the El Nino. And what we saw ultimately were weaker trade winds than what we were supposed to get, and hence the MDR, the Caribbean, and the Gulf warmed up as well, really well. Now, why did they stay warm? That's the main thing we should also talk about as well. The reason they stayed warm was because all the tropical cyclones that developed, with the exception of a few, including Hurricane Idalia, they stayed out to sea. They did not touch very much land with the exception of Hurricane Tammy. They stayed out to sea because of the weak PNA and the Bermuda highs just completely collapsing all the time and moving systems out to sea. We saw that with Lee, which became a Category 5. We covered that on Pat's Path Predictor. We saw that with other systems as well. And because of that, the Gulf stayed very warm. The Caribbean stayed very warm. The OHC that was in both of those regions remained very untapped. And that carried up to 2024 because you had all that warm water kind of in a pressure cooker at that point, because what hurricanes typically do is their purpose is to cool the waters down. They mix the waters, they upwell the waters to help cool them down. Because we didn't have very much tropical activity in the Western Atlantic in 2023, with the exception of Idalia, that's why they stayed warm. Another reason why we saw record warm temperatures was there was a huge high pressure heat dome that's just stayed over the Gulf for such a long time. And that's when you start seeing 100 plus degrees Fahrenheit waters off the Florida Keys and off the Everglades. That because you had local weather also played a factor into this. Florida had a massive heat wave. Yoshi, I'm sure you remember this. Florida 2 years ago was going through a pretty big heat wave, if I remember correctly, and it, at least locally, really turned up the water temperatures. So there's a lot of factors.
Tell you, man.
Yeah, there's a lot of factors into this, but ultimately what it boiled down to was no tropical activity in the Western Atlantic. No, a weak PNA that drove all the systems out of the Atlantic, and a very explosive Gulf Stream that allowed the subtropics to warm up to a point where it just absolutely crushed whatever the El Nino was doing, and that in turn weakened the trade winds and allowed for the warming to happen all across the tropics. I know that's pretty long. I do apologize for that, but I hope that explains it.
We do have another question here, actually.
Yep.
Is this, if the tropical system does form, do you think it will head into the Carolinas, or do you think it'll head out to sea? And I want to answer this
You
one.
go ahead.
A lot of the models, especially today and last night, have pointed towards kind of a stalling over the Florida coast here, just out of the Florida coast, actually, towards the Georgia coast. And then it would head up towards Georgia and the Carolinas. And it's been a lot of models have been fairly consistent about that now, and pretty much all the models have picked that up. So we could see something like a Carolina landfall, more than likely South Carolina, a lot of models are saying.
Yep.
And due to the shape of the United States, it's fairly easy to see like an Outer Banks landfall maybe in North Carolina too, if it decides to go a bit more north. So I personally think we could see a Carolina landfall. It's not guaranteed, obviously, but it certainly is a possibility.
Yeah. All right. All right. What's the next question that we have? All right. I answered the question about the Atlantic. Um, okay. Do we have any more, Yoshi, you want to take a look at?
For now, I don't think so until we get new models out, that is, but we won't be around by then, so
Yeah, that's
I
not
don't
going to
think we have
happen.
much new data.
Yeah.
Won't have much new data in a while unless it like really starts doing something here.
Yeah. I'm going to I don't think even we have it on this on Dapia or anything like that. No, we don't. That sucks, but it is what it is. Well, this needs to be designated in Infest first. Hopefully, this does get designated so I can look at a more look at more at a mesoscale minute to minute type of situation instead of just looking at it for multiple hours while talking about that. So yeah, that's kind of our system that we have that we have going on right now. And based on early returns, they are quite promising. So yeah, that was that's interesting. So is there anything else that
Mhm.
you I th- or is there anything else, Yoshi, that you want to go over, or do we? Is
No,
all right,
I'm sorry, I'm getting a call.
all right. You take care of that. Yeah, I think in terms of we wanted to talk about tonight, in terms of what we were what we wanted to take a quick look at. I think we've covered everything in at least in the aspects of this area of interest over here in the that the NHC has designated. Is there anything you in the audience? Is there anything you guys want to go over of in the stream else? Because I really don't have much else to go over tonight. I wanted to go over this threat that's going on across parts of the Atlantic right here, and just kind of do an analysis on that. So, if there's anything you guys want to go over, please let me know. If not, then can we check the trade winds? We did that earlier, but we can check them again for all of our interests. So let's take a quick look at that. We're looking at we're looking at weaker trade winds across much of the tropics. The Caribbean does start to get stronger trade winds, but ultimately you are looking at weaker trade winds, and that's really going to help warm up the Atlantic, especially in the main development region moving forward. So that's kind of what we're looking at right there. I do appreciate you for asking. So, yeah. All right. Okay. All right.
I'm planning to go here in a bit because I don't think this is gonna last too long, but I will tell you, we've been looking at scores of the GFS and ECMWF here,
Yeah.
and for verification, and they've been for a lack of a better word here, complete crap at this point. If you look at the screen here, ECMWF and GFS have gone considerably down below the gold standard of zero point 0.9 here,
Yeah.
and that is because of a certain pattern we're seeing.
Oh.
The quote the H5 pattern across the northern hemisphere. So, and it doesn't handle that very well. So, I'm not sure if this is going to affect our tropical system. More than likely, it would. So,
Yeah.
we're just going to have to see, kind of go, I guess, slightly blinder than we normally do here.
Yeah. That's why we say models are one thing, but conditions are a whole other ballpark.
Mhm.
So if we need, so I would say at least I would say that real time data would be more important for right now than what we have seen previously. So that would not be optimal right here. Oof,
Mm.
that's pretty concerning. Basically, this is how accurate the European and GFS are typically right here, and we're not as accurate as we were previously, especially with this system right here. So that's something we're going to have to watch. Oh
Hmm.
boy, that's not good.
All right, so it doesn't look like we have more questions, and we have really nothing else to talk about. So
Yeah, someone in chat was asking about the Bermuda High. It looks like it is taking more of a back step, and the Azores High is going to be mostly dominant through much of early July. But there might be one situation where the Bermuda High comes back for a little bit, but it's not going to last particularly that long. But we'll have to see how that goes. But I would say this month is going to be more Azores High dominant than Bermuda High dominant. So thank you for the question. How does a negative PNA how does a negative PNA warm the Atlantic? It's it's kind of climatologic. It's kind of more climate has to do with climatology and all of that. Climatology and all of that. Trying to I'm trying to it's kind of a hard thing to answer actually. I just know that contributed to what happened in 2023. What do you think the icon is trying to show? It's been consistent about showing something at the end.
something
Icon.
at the end. Let's see about something at the end, actually.
Let me see.
Because I personally didn't see it looking at models for my forecast, but
I th- are they referring to what's potentially
the
happening?
other system,
Yeah, potentially happening in the subtropics. Potentially.
yeah, no other models support that. Icon's just hanging around it for some reason.
Yeah, I mean they're yeah. I've been looking at it. Oh, man, I'll have to talk to Weather Center Nazario more about that too, since he's been kind of watching it. But that's kind of what's going on.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's
We
kind of
have
where
no
we're
real
at.
support for any other things at the moment, so
Yeah, the icon is holding on to it, but yeah, unless we see something crazy happen, where other models start picking up on it, I'm not too keen on this. So that's where I'm at.
Mhm.
So
All right.
I think that's
Pat,
about. I'm done. Yeah.
yeah, I'm done.
Oh
I think we should just end the stream
yeah,
here
yeah,
personally.
yeah.
Doesn't
We'll go
matter.
ahead and do that. When will we go live again? My plan is to go live on Sunday evening, so we
Mhm.
can go over some more tropics and all of that, and kind of instead of focusing on what's going on now, we can take more of a bigger picture and see. Okay, tropics are starting or pretend we're looking at the tropics right now. When are things going to start getting hairy? So that's going to kind of be the theme of Sunday night stream. So with that being
I
said,
believe Sunday
oh,
night stream is more than likely going to be some
what do you mean?
focused on our system here. It's going to be Ver by Ven,
Okay,
and it's going to be near land if the
yeah,
models are correct about this. So
yeah. Well,
should probably focus on that
for sure.
a
Yeah,
lot
we'll
more.
focus on that, and then we'll schedule another stream to talk about big picture stuff. So, so yeah, be sure you stay tuned for us on Sunday night. We will be back at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 7 p.m. Central Time, as we continue to cover this situation across parts of the East Coast. Happy 4th of July tomorrow. If you are not getting rained out, be sure to enjoy the fireworks and be sure to celebrate. I've already bought a lot of food. I'm gonna have a lot to eat tomorrow for to grill after I grill it and all of that stuff. So I'm gonna be pretty happy about that. But ultimately, that's our situation for tonight. Yoshi, first of all, thank you for coming on the stream once again.
To be here.
Yep. With that being said, we're going to go ahead and close the stream out right here. I really hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to like the stream, subscribe to the channel if you are new. The goal, as always, is to get more people engaged with weather. If you want to help out, hang out, or ask us questions, be sure to join the Storms United Discord server. The link to that is in the description. And with that being said, have a wonderful day, guys.